All right, we're running dual programming here. We were talking about local stuff here, but also with this shooting going on at the Navy Yard. For those who are interested in that, we've got that up at stltoday.com. You can watch that live. It's not that nothing's going on, but we're waiting to see what happens. They're looking for a gunman inside the Navy Yard. 5 now, they're saying, have been killed inside the Navy Yard. We're watching that. Injured. 5 are injured. I apologize. 5 are injured inside the Navy Yard. We've got the video up on the internet, KTRS.com, as well as STLtoday.com. We're monitoring that. When something happens, we will bring that to you as well, or you can watch along with your devices. David Stokes is with us, Show Me Policy Institute analyst. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, McGraw.
The story broke middle of last week, first reported at STLtoday.com. Laclede Gas is not happy with their current digs of 43 years.
And they're getting some very generous tax incentives to move about 3 blocks to the south.
Okay. Now.
And that's the issue. It's the tax incentives here, at least to my mind, are the issue. But it's just crazy.
Now, in the past, we've had governors from states like Texas come and say, hey, we're going to steal your business if you don't change. We've had right up the street here, we had Walmart move 2 miles down the road because one city cut a better deal than another city. I've never seen a tax increment financing deal to move a company 3 blocks up the street in the same city.
Well, it certainly has happened before. It's happened plenty of times in the city and in Kansas City, but this is a big one. This is going to be bigger than most, and it's going to leave a giant hole in the Laclede gas building where they've been for, as you said, over 40 years. And look, if they need to move and if they want new headquarters, that's fine, and I wish the company all the best. But it's a good example of the insanity of our TIF and tax credit system that we're subsidizing a large company moving 3 to 4 blocks in the same area.
But it isn't like it's AT&T, where they said they're going to close off their building and they're going to scatter their workforce other places. Laclede is the gas company for the region, so they can't move to Texas, right? So they can't move to California. So they have to stay in the region because they're our gas company.
You would think so.
Right. So what's their bargaining chip? We're going to move 3 blocks down the road, and if you don't give us the tax financing, we'll tell you what we're going to do. I mean, it makes no sense.
Well, it doesn't. I think their bargaining chip is that, they'll move to St. Louis County and save on the earnings tax and the payroll tax. So the city, fearful of that, is happy to give, I believe it's about $8 million in tax increment financing on top of from the story, $8 or $9 million in tax credits from the state. And they're certainly not leaving the state of Missouri here.
Right.
But it's a good example of how this everywhere in the state, the city of St. Louis in particular, but St. Louis County suburbs are just as bad, and it happens in Kansas City. We're just so used to giving away these subsidies for everything. I mean, literally for everything, to the point now where we're giving away 16, 17 millions of dollars of people's tax money for a company that's going to move a couple blocks.
Which that Gen American Insurance building has sat vacant for years. And so that's a giant hole. So it seems like it's just moving the nugget under a different shell. So you move those 400 employees up the street to Mike Shannon's. Okay, that's great for Mike Shannon's, but you've just moved 400 employees 3 blocks away. So now that other building sits vacant. What's the end benefit? There is no end benefit. It's a zero-sum game. The only person that wins is the company, but the tax base loses and everybody else loses.
Right. The tax base loses, and over time, the city will be for it, and the schools and the other districts within the city will have to raise their rates on everybody else to make up for this huge TIF in the middle. But, I mean, we had a lot of news on the North Side TIF. I mean, this is an $8 million TIF for Laclede Gas. I mean, the value of the North Side TIF will be up to $390 million in tax dollars. And it just happens so often in the city. They just give it away. Now, again, I don't mean to pick on the city. We know that the suburbs and the county are
but there's
bad.
But there's a difference with the North County Paul McKee TIF, because you can make the argument that there hasn't been any real development in the north side for years and years and years. And so here's a guy wanting to come in saying, give me some incentive to make it worth my while. All right, you can argue whether or not that's beneficial. You can even argue by saying, hey, we're going to steal your Walmart. Too bad for you, but good for us, because we might give you a little tax incentive, but we're going to make more money, so it's good for us, bad for you. Sorry, that's just the way it is. But in this instance, the city is saying, you're already here. You're going to move 3 blocks. Now we're just going to have an empty building 3 blocks in a different direction. There is no economic benefit that I can see for this company to move to another building in the same city. Now the Laclede building is going to be empty, and this other building is going to be full. There's nobody wins in this.
Nobody does. And this happened it didn't come through, but a year or two ago there was talk about subsidizing some companies moving into Ballpark Village from other parts of downtown.
Right.
And I don't think it happened, but it's really just the same thing, and it's happened before. You're so fearful of cities leaving to the county that you're just hollowing out your property tax base all around, because you, from the city's perspective and trying to see how they would see it, you need those earnings tax dollars. And every time they do this, for all the talk of eventually wanting to move away from the earnings tax, every time you give away a new TIF like this, you make it all the harder to eventually move away from the earnings tax.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wish the state legislature would come in and make it so that cities couldn't do this, right? I mean, cities are doing this because they have to in some instances, or they feel they're beholden and that they have no other choice. But if the state came in and sort of superseded and wrote a law that says, you can't do this, or changed it, to give some protection to the cities so that they can't be held up by some of these developers, but the state has no interest in fixing this problem.
Well, the solution we've talked about many times of empowering the county TIF commissions to override municipal TIF commissions and to override cities would work in much of Missouri. But because of the city's unique status, that solution doesn't really work here. The city is still going to make its choice. So you need some type of legislative change, really making it much more difficult, if not impossible, to give incentives for businesses just moving within Missouri.
Right.
And the problem with that is I think you'll almost always, the lawyers, the planners, the financiers, they'll always find a way around the legislative law. I always put my money on the attorneys and the bankers and the planners over the poor bureaucrat in Jeff City trying to write a law. But that said, there hasn't been enough of an attempt to really limit the amount of incentives for people already in Missouri just moving within Missouri, and we do need something. And the interesting thing about this Laclede gas is it sort of highlights the absurdity of the situation.
Right.
Because people can see $18 million for them to move that. This is crazy.
Right, yeah, exactly, because they're moving 3 blocks away. Talk about picking winners and losers. If you were to move from, say, the Shaw neighborhood to downtown, and you were to ask an alderman for some type of economic benefit, they would laugh at you. But you're Laclede Gas, and all of a sudden, hey, well, let's see what we can do. You're a big developer. It just shows the absurdity, and it shows that governments really do pick winners and losers, no matter what they say, and no matter how many times they say they don't. Republicans, Democrats, they do all the time, and it's just, it's so frustrating to the individual who really has no say in the matter.
Well, McGraw, I can't put it any better than that. They pick these things constantly at the state level, at the local level, and in the end, you get these core businesses that get the breaks, but it's just the average taxpayer that makes it up on the back end. David
Stokes with us. Got about a minute left. David, any thing out of Jefferson City, any override, any underride you paying attention to? or like and or dislike? Any thoughts on the absurdity of that circus?
Not surprisingly, I was disappointed that the tax cut bill, HB 253, wasn't passed last week.
Right.
I think we don't see it as much in St. Louis. We're competing against Illinois, which has all sorts of problems.
Right.
But over in Kansas, according to the federal government, we have some blog posts up about this. just about all of the job growth in recent years in the Kansas City area has been in Kansas. Like almost all of it. The numbers are astounding, and they're cutting taxes and making it more. They're cutting taxes for everybody. They're not just giving incentives away to select businesses, although they do that too, and that's wrong. But now they've started cutting taxes for everybody, and I just think that Missouri should have responded. And at least a small response that was a step in the right direction was better than nothing at all.
That's David Stokes, ladies and gentlemen. When can we read you? When can we see you?
You can see your writings on all of these subjects at showmeinstitute.org, or you can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
That's David Stokes, Show Me Policy Analyst. We'll check in with Mike Kelly, talk a little Mizzou football. That's straight ahead, Big 550.